Welcome everyone to DCYOP Presents, our weekly in-depth interview with DC Youth Orchestra program artists about what inspires them. I am Liz Shergan, your host and the Executive Director of DCYOP. On today's show, we are joined by DCYOP faculty member and violinist, Derek Powell. Hi, Derek.
Hi, Liz. Hi, DCYO family.
Derek has not only curated a great viewing list for us today, he also plans to share some of his most meaningful experiences as a musician. We really want DCYOP Presents to be an interactive experience, and so we will be answering some of our viewers' questions throughout the show. If you have a question for Derek, or if you have a thought you would like to share with us, please feel free to type that in the chat box. As a note, our audience is mostly children and families, so please be kind and thoughtful. Arles, say hello, Arles.
Hi, everyone.
He's our Assistant Director of Operations, and he will monitor our chat throughout today's show. So let's get started. Derek, tell us about how you were connected to DCYOP.
Sure. Currently, I am the coach of the First Violin YO and First Violin YP violin sections. When I first came to DC, I started teaching in the DCYOP after-school program at Garrison Elementary, and that's been my trajectory here.
Awesome. And so I believe that a little over a year ago, you played a solo with our Youth Philharmonic, did you not?
That is correct. Yes, I performed Saint-Saëns Rondo Capriccioso with the YP Orchestra, and it was a lot of fun.
And we have a clip of that for you to listen to today. So Evan, can you cue us up? Wow, that was pretty amazing, Derek. We have some comments, including one from last week's guest artist, Natalia Kazarian. She says, wow, beautiful. Bravo, Derek and DC Youth Orchestra. Tell us, what was it like to perform with the DC Youth Philharmonic? Derek, you're on mute.
It was great playing with my students. I get to coach every week and collaborate with them. It was also a lot of fun because the last time I played that piece was with the National Symphony when I was a sophomore in high school. So it was fun coming back to that piece, and there's just a lot of love and joy in the concert, and I love seeing how the students engaged with it and making music together with them.
It's amazing. So you were once in youth orchestra yourself. Tell us, when did you start playing the violin?
I started violin when I was 4 years old. I remember my parents had music playing in the background, and I think I saw it on TV, and I was instantly drawn to it. And I kept begging my parents if I could. I was asking them if I could take lessons, and I think they wanted me to start on piano. My dad's amateur pianist, but they relented and allowed me to play violin. And then around fourth grade, I started with the Wisconsin Youth Symphony Orchestra, a program quite similar to DCYO. And that was my first experience playing with other kids my age and learning about collaboration.
So my big question for you is, was pizza a really big part of your youth orchestra experience like it is at the DC Youth Orchestra program?
We weren't as lucky to have pizza every week like they do at DCYO, but there was one big like pizza festival at the end of every year, and I remember I would gorge myself silly.
I also understand that when you were a student in youth orchestra, that your teacher, your violin teacher, actually had a watch party for what is kind of an unusual film. Tell us about that.
Yes. In this particular, we're going to watch a clip in a little bit, but we had a watch party. We had pizza and popcorn, and we all sat and watched. We didn't know what the movie was going to be. But the general plot, I'll just give the beginning, is this young street urchin, kind of inner city youth. He finds a ticket on the ground, him and his friend, to a concert. And they sneak in, well, don't sneak in, they have tickets, but it's basically right in the front row. Everyone's wearing tuxes, and they're kind of in old school newsboy caps, this black and white. And the concert is of Heifetz, a really famous violinist who actually is in the movie. And you'll see his amazing technique and musicality. And it just so happens Heifetz is also performing the Rondo and Capriccioso in the film.
So we're going to actually pick up right where you left off in that performance. And so here is from the 1939 film, They Shall Have Music.
This is awful. Why don't they start the show?
I guess this is it.
Oh, let's beat it. Why, that's murder up there. They can't get away with that.
You can beat it if you wanna.
Okay. I tell you for a fact, I can't stand the smell. So we have a comment that
this music is awesome, and that it really is. So is Heifetz. And from my understanding, he plays an important role in this movie. Can you give us a little bit more sense about the plot? What happens?
Yeah, so after they're in this concert scene, the main character, he wants to go to music school, so they stop into this music school, and there's a youth orchestra rehearsing, and a kid plays what's supposed to be an A, the tuning A, and plays a wrong note. I think he plays like a C sharp or something. And Frankie, I think the main character's name is Frankie, is like, no, that's a C sharp. And the orchestra director hears him, and eventually he becomes part of the youth orchestra and music school, which unfortunately runs into financial trouble. And the main arc of the story then is the main character and his friend, they kind of sneak into Heifetz's house and convince Heifetz to help them raise money for the music school. And so Heifetz actually has a speaking role also later in the music, or later in the movie. So it's kind of fun to see him trying to act when he's such a great musician, and which is kind of acting, but then see him talking is very unique.
I've seen this film, and I'm certain that many of our DC Youth Orchestra program students have not as well. So maybe we'll have to arrange for a watch party with Mr. Derek, as you are so fondly known at DCYOP, you know, where everyone can watch and have the comfort of their homes. How's that sound?
I think that'd be a lot of fun.
And so just for all of those that are viewing today, the name of that film is They Shall Have Music, and it was actually filmed and released in 1939. So it's a bit of an, as Evan would say, old-timey movie. And so after youth orchestra, you went on to college, but you were still uncertain at that point on whether or not you wanted a career in music. And from what I understand, you actually double majored in both music performance and neurobiology. Tell us a little bit about that.
That is true. So growing up, music was always a very important part of my life, but it was by no means like the only thing I did. And when I was preparing to go to university, I kind of faced a dilemma. A lot of my friends wanted to do music 100%, and they were going to go to music schools. And I couldn't make that decision because I also had other interests, such as science. And my kind of a philosophy of mine, as you might see through this discussion, has been I always want to keep as many doors open as possible for myself. And so I decided to double major because I knew if I didn't also major in music, I would probably stop practicing and just let my technique go to the wayside and maybe never pick it up again. So I made sure to keep that as a central part of what I did. And it was a lot of fun majoring in neurobiology and researching behavioral biology as it relates to neuroscience. And that was kind of my interest. And I was able to balance it all and make it out basically unscathed. But it was definitely an interesting time.
And so after college, you kind of on a whim auditioned for what's known as the New World Symphony, and you were successful in that. So tell us, what is the New World Symphony and what was your experience there?
I was so fortunate to be able to audition into New World Symphony, which is also called America's Orchestral Academy. In my senior year, I was again faced with almost the exact same dilemma I had coming out of high school, and that I didn't know if if I was good enough to make it as a musician, or what my musical future might be. But I knew I didn't want to go to grad school yet. So I was thinking of maybe moving to New York and trying to freelance and trying to break into the pit orchestra Broadway scene or something. And my teacher at the time, Felicia Moy, she suggested I audition for New World Symphony. And when I went to the website and looked at all the bios of the people that were in it currently then, I was kind of blown away and really intimidated. I was like, there's no way I belong with these kids that went to Juilliard and Curtis. I just went to state school at University of Wisconsin-Madison, which has great music school and great teacher, but I didn't feel like maybe I belonged with these other musicians. But I was fortunate enough to win a spot. And when I got there, I found I fit right in. Just have to keep working hard, as we always do. And I learned so much about making music with people, about making music within an orchestra, and basically everything there is to learn about being a 21st century musician, like public speaking and curating concerts, and teaching, which gave me a leg up when I came to DC and was able to start at DCYOP.
That's amazing. And I understand that while you were at New World Symphony, you had one of the most profound and meaningful symphonic experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because we have planned for our viewers to watch a little bit of a recording, not of that performance, but what inspired that performance.
Definitely. So while we're at New World Symphony, we have basically an orchestral schedule. So it was founded, the whole program is founded by Michael Tilson Thomas, very, if not the most famous American-born conductor, especially that's still working now. And but he's not there all the time. And like most major orchestras, other conductors from all over the world come to conduct. And one concert cycle, this conductor, Stéphane Deneuve, who's a French conductor who I hadn't ever heard of before working with him, who is now the current music director, conductor of the St. Louis Symphony. He came to conduct a program, and one of the pieces on that program was Arthur Honegger's Third Symphony, Liturgique. And it became a really profound musical experience for me, learning this piece of music and hearing him speak about it. And one of the things that really stuck with me when he was speaking about the piece was how he really compared the two to the piece to Picasso's Guernica, arguably Picasso's most famous work. And it was his response to the Spanish Civil War. And this piece, Honegger's Third Symphony that we're about to listen to, is his response to World War II. So it's kind of been interesting to see a visual representation of the atrocity and horrible facts of war of a visual artist at one time, and then also of the sonic world that Honegger creates.
So we are going to listen to the first 3 minutes of that symphony right now, juxtaposed against the painting that you were talking about. And I'm curious to know what our listeners think. What does this make you feel? What images come to mind? That was the first 3 minutes of Honegger's Symphony Number 3. We have some comments that say, this music is awesome. I feel fear, terror, fleeing, an army marching, struggle, chaos, discord. You can hear all of that in the music. And I also heard this very strong, intense rhythmic element to it, which I know is something that is important to you when you're listening to music. You're really attracted to works that have that kind of rhythmic intensity. Tell us about that.
Definitely. Yeah, when I listen to music, when I feel music, I invariably kind of feel my body getting into it. I like to feel the physicality of the rhythm and the musical phrase. And this is definitely a great example of something where you can feel that kind of rhythmic energy. Someone said an army marching. And I also hear a lot of kind of conversational, or almost not conversational, but shouting, confrontational elements. You have the low brass, and then you have the strings, and maybe someone shouting at someone else. And it's, I think also, if you then look at the Picasso painting, you can see similar elements. You can just look at one figure, but invariably you're kind of drawn to like things, they're interacting with each other. And that's what's most fun about music. Like also someone mentioned Shostakovich. It does have the same type of elements of fear or repression that Shostakovich also felt as a composer in Soviet Russia.
Yeah, and that actually brings us to our next example. We have a clip of Prokofiev's Second Violin Concerto, and I believe the reason that we picked this is because it features your favorite violinist, who you have noted you really appreciate her physicality and the intensity in which she plays. Tell us about what we're about to see and why you're so inspired by this person.
Definitely. So the little clip we're going to watch is of my favorite violinist, Ginny Jansen. She's going to be playing the second movement of her second violin, or of Prokofiev's Second Violin Concerto. I was lucky enough to perform this with her from the orchestra when I was in Verbier at a festival in Switzerland. And I'd like everyone to just kind of see the way she not only moves, but what she does with her bow to make different sounds come out. What I really like about her playing is you can see all those little things that she does. Maybe her bow goes towards the fingerboard to make a more transparent sound, or maybe the bow starts to speed up to create a crescendo. A lot of great violinists that we see, we're just kind of dumbfounded with what they're doing. Like for me, like watching Hilary Hahn, I'm just like, how is she doing making these sounds? But with Gina Jansen, you can really see exactly what she is doing to create her amazing sound world.
Okay, let's watch some of that right now. was pretty amazing. I see we have a visitor.
It's Mr. Fluffy Laquette. I think he's a Prokofiev fan too.
God, goodness, Mr. Fluffy has a good taste. So we have a comment from one of our panelists. I like how she looks back at the orchestra. She's part of them. They are part of her. Absolutely. Is that your experience playing with her?
Definitely. And I kind of, when I read that comment, I was thinking back to the Heifetz performance we just watched, and kind of that old school soloist thing was to just, I'm the soloist, you better be with me. So Heifetz would just make crazy phrases and just start something. The orchestra just had to be with him. Whereas now, I think, and I don't know if it's a more sensitive era or just a more collaborative environment, she is aware of what the orchestra is doing and trying to be part of that, not just stand at the front and be like, this is about me.
Absolutely. And I hope that all of our viewers watch that whole performance, as with all of the videos that we're playing today. Each video, because Derek had such great examples, we are only playing a short clip of each video. We will post the listening list after this show today so that you can watch all of the videos. And I think where we're going to move next is what happened after New World Symphony. So you went off to graduate school at Rice in Houston, and then after graduate school you moved to Washington, D.C. And not long after you moved to Washington, D.C., you got a job with actually the largest employer of musicians in the United States, which may surprise some people, is the U.S. military. Tell us a little bit about that.
Definitely. And I would say maybe the world, if we think about how many musicians that the United States employs. And we usually think of Germany or European countries as subsidizing music at a state level, but the military and the Army especially is a large employer of music. And after I'd been living here about 8 or 9 months, I was still teaching in the after-school program for DCYO, and I was fortunate enough to win a position in the Army Strings. I'm part of the Army band Pershin Zone, and as part of that, I had to go off to basic training for 10 weeks, or as I like to think of it, a 10-week vacation from the violin, which was the longest I'd ever gone without playing the violin up to that point. And at basic training, we did all the things anybody who's joining the Army will experience as regular basic training, because not only are we musicians, we're also soldiers. So I learned how to use a firearm and throw grenades. And actually, I found a lot of parallels to music, violinistically, of target practice is using a lot of the same things of noticing what you did wrong. Maybe you play slightly too sharp on that C sharp, or you always seem to shoot to the right of the target. And you just have to kind of have that mental clarity to bring yourself back and fix those mistakes. And once I got back to DC and joined the band, I found a great group of musicians. I love my colleagues there, and play primarily with the strings, but we also do full orchestra concerts with the concert band.
Tell us what it's like to be a musician in the military. What do you do on a weekly basis? Who do you play for, and why?
So primarily the strings are their own self-sufficient group, and our main mission is to play for leaders of the United States, so a lot of congressional functions, and then also leaders of the military. I'd say kind of the most glamorous and memorable, maybe not memorable, but most glamorous events we played for the state dinner of when Australia visited just a couple months ago, and for the French state visit. And we also, I played at Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's event for Women's History Month last month. And we'll also play in intimate settings in General's living room, kind of being musical ambassadors or musical diplomats to connect us with our allies.
That's pretty amazing. And I must admit that before I moved to DC, I too did not know how huge the opportunities are to be a musician within the U.S. military, and what an amazing and rewarding career it can be.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that you were able to share that with us today. And we actually have a clip of a performance that you gave with the Army String Quartet at the Kennedy Center in honor of Black History Month. And the clip is of you and your colleagues playing George Walker's First String Quartet. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with George Walker, he's an amazing composer who unfortunately recently passed away. He's from DC originally, and he had a huge and wonderful relationship with the DC Youth Orchestra program. In fact, we premiered a piece of his at Carnegie Hall, a dress for orchestra. And so if for those of you who are in DCYOP or have been around DCYOP for some time, you know that one of our favorite pieces to play is George Walker's Lyric for Strings. So it's pretty special that you are sharing George Walker, a friend of the orchestra. You are also on stage with another DCYOP faculty member, Aaron Ludwig, right?
Yes.
So let's hear a little bit of that. Thank you, Derek, for sharing that with us.
Definitely.
I have some questions about the uniforms that you'll walk us through, because I believe as a member of Pershin Zone, you always are performing in uniform, but you wear different uniforms depending on the occasion. Can you just talk to us about that?
Correct. So that uniform is called our distinctive uniform, distinctive blues. It's specific and to just this band, Army band, Pershin Zone. And the name Pershin Zone is from General Pershin from World War I, who heard a great tradition of military music in Europe, which we didn't really have yet in the US. And so he was one who kind of formed what today's band we have. And so our distinctive uniform is actually based on a lot of his kind of idiosyncrasies. He designed his own uniform. And so the collar is kind of a Mandarin collar. We have 8 buttons down the front, which signify the 8 notes of an octave. And there's a lyre we have on our collar, and our insignia is flipped from the normal insignia. So I'm a staff sergeant, and normally the rocker, the round part, would be on the bottom. But during the Civil War, they had the cavalry had the inverted insignia, and Pershin was fond of that, and so we have that on our uniform. So there's a lot of unique and interesting elements to this particular uniform.
So if we see anyone on the street or around the district that is wearing that uniform, that means they're part of Pershin Zone.
Correct, yes. And we're all at Fort Myer, Virginia, right across Potomac from the Kennedy Center.
Amazing. And so in addition to playing in the Army, you're also a pretty avid chamber music musician in the area. Can you share what else do you do on the violin outside of being a member of the U.S. Army Band? Definitely.
So I perform in a couple of other ensembles around town. There's InSkate, which Maestro Sherbo and Maestro Solomon are both co-founders of, and we play a lot of contemporary compositions. I love playing with them and the collective. And then another group that I love playing with around town is Sound Impact. And their kind of mission is community engagement and to bring kind of classical music or instrumental music to audiences that normally wouldn't have access to those experiences. And so I've done a couple of residencies now with them at the DC Youth Rehabilitation Center. And we had a couple of day residency where we would play music and then encourage the residents there to either write lyrics or write a story, poems, or draw pictures that went along with the music we curated and brought into them. And then I teach, maintain a small studio, and I also play weddings here and there on the side. And that's a lot of fun playing. A lot of the time now it's pop music, and that lets me kind of, I don't want to say let my hair down, but play some non-classical repertoire and be able to forget about the traditions that we have to follow for Mozart and Bach and Beethoven, and kind of just do what I grew up listening to on the radio and just have fun.
That's great. So if any of our viewers are going to get married soon, they can contact you?
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. So I always like to ask where you find inspiration outside of the classical music realm. And I know that you have brought 2 videos to share with us today. Can you tell us a little bit about each video? Maybe start with the first video, what attracts you to it and where it comes from?
Definitely. So the first little snippet is of a performer, a musician, comedian, kind of multimedia expert, Reggie Watts. I don't know if many people have seen him. He's pretty famous now, but he starts with very small snippets of kind of sound and uses loop pedals and other digital devices to kind of layer things on top of each other. So you start out with something simple and then hear a really complex composition at the end. And I think most of what he does is improvisational during his performances.
So we have a little clip of that today.
This will feel how you style these raps. I'm letting you. Oh, yeah. Get yourself on out, do the projections and you find out, yeah, molecular structure ain't nothing but a thing. Oh yeah, molecular structure ain't nothing but a thing. Oh no, generally ascribing to the geometry that identifies you as a being that people can recognize over and over, cause they have the ability to memorize it. And just because you think you know what you're doing don't mean a thing, cause science knows that you don't really know anything. Just temporarily have a mild understanding of how things really are.
It's so fun, like listening to what he does, and you kind of forget something's going on, and you're like, oh wait, I remember when he recorded the bass line like 5 minutes ago. And
yeah, absolutely. And I thought his final message was pretty on point for the time that we're in.
Definitely.
We have some thank yous from our comments for playing that. People appreciate Reggie Watts, so thank you for picking that today. And the next piece that we have is completely different. Tell us a little bit about it and what instruments we're going to see and what we're going to hear.
Definitely. So this is more fusion music. So if we have our Western classical music that we kind of concentrate on as classical musicians, but there's also a plethora of classical music styles from other countries. And India has probably one of the longest and oldest classical traditions, just meaning that they have set forms and they've been using those for centuries. And there was a Western jazz musician, John McLaughlin, guitar player, who got really interested in these ragas. They're kind of epic, long musical forms. And he went to India and learned a lot of them. It's an oral tradition, nothing's written down, but you'll have these complex pieces that everyone just knows. And so you'll see, instrumental-wise, you'll see a tabla player, that's the drum, big clay pot. The guy's got big, fat, thick fingers from just banging on a pot for his whole life. And you'll see Western violin, which they've kind of, Indian classical music has incorporated into their classical idiom. And you'll see John McLaughlin on the guitar, and I think there's a couple other percussion instruments also. But rhythmically, this is some of the most complex music out there, and it's also cool because it's a synthesis of Western jazz music.
That's awesome. Let's hear it.
band's name, the band's name is Shakti. I forgot to mention that.
And we'll post the link to this so that if you want to listen to the whole performance or you want to listen to it again and again, you'll have that opportunity. So I found those pretty inspiring. I find talking to you and learning about you as an artist also inspiring. And so my question for you is, where do you find inspiration as an artist?
There's quite a few places. I think collaboration just with people. I think both those videos that I just shared were videos that someone had shared with me, and I just got so excited about seeing it. Now, of course, you have YouTube playlists and you'll find something you would have never thought to look for. And then also, I think nature, which is a common theme actually through classical music. You think about Beethoven taking strolls, his daily stroll, or Vivaldi's Four Seasons, taking walks outside and just seeing kind of the natural beauty. It's a great way to not maybe create inspiration, but to be inspired.
That's wonderful. And so you have one more video today that we're going to share. And I believe this is your favorite classical artist, correct?
Yes. I think, well, I don't know if I have one favorite, but it's definitely one of my most favorite. So this next clip is a clip of Emmanuel Axe, or Manny Axe, as many people know him. He's a piano soloist, has been around for quite a while. And I've worked with him, been fortunate enough to work with him a couple of times. And seeing him speak and seeing how he makes music, he's just one of the most human people I've ever met, just so giving and open and warm, and his music, I think, reflects that. And well, you'll see his phenomenal skill.
think I can listen to Maniacs playing Beethoven any day.
Definitely inspiring. Just the way he can make a phrase just float and float and float and sparkle. Yeah, it's just amazing.
So, Derek, this is a challenging time for us all, one where music plays an especially important role. What advice do you have for our viewers? How can they use music to stay grounded and connected?
Definitely, it's a difficult time, especially when a lot of music making usually means direct human-to-human contact. Thankfully, we have technology giving us this ability to speak today and speak to all of you out there. So I think it's an amazing time to be a musician during a quarantine because we can still make music together. I've seen so many amazing videos on Facebook and Instagram of people collaborating across the ocean. But it's also a great time for self-reflection, and music can be used in so many different ways, whether it's emotional reflection or maybe an emotional escape from reality. So we can listen to music and feel a lot of joy, or we can maybe revel in the sadness of the current situation. And it's also a great time just to physically as a craft, because you can go into a room and just work on something for yourself and for your future self. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to use creativity, physicality, emotion, and all those things and join them together.
It's great advice. So the more music, the better.
Definitely.
So Derek, if our DCYOP community wants to hear you again as a performer, how can they do that?
Well, once this epidemic is over and society is back running at full tilt, I'll be starting with the National Symphony Orchestra. And you'll be able to see me, I'm sure, playing with Inkscape and Sound Impacts. I'll be around, and come say hi at DCYO. And I love making music with everyone there.
Well, we're so grateful to have you as our guest and as a faculty member. So thank you. It was a pleasure to speak with you today.
So fun speaking to you, Liz.
In the coming days, we will post this recording online, as well as Derek's listening list with links to the full performances. We want to know what you thought of today's show, so please take a short survey posted in the chat. And some more things to look forward to. Derek mentioned this earlier, that nature is something that he finds very inspiring as an artist, and that's lines us up perfectly for tomorrow. That we hope that you will join us for our second course in the Listening to Music series, The Nature of the Orchestra. Artistic director Evan Solomon, also the producer of today's show, will discuss how composers have drawn inspiration from their natural surroundings and explore the orchestral techniques they have used to evoke these settings. So if you're interested in joining us tomorrow at 3 p.m., the link is available on our website. We'll also be posting on our social media. And in the coming weeks, we will be posting the schedule for DCYOP Presents, including all of the wonderful faculty and guest artists that we will be featuring. For those of you who are looking forward to seeing the String Queens, their show has been postponed, but we hope to get a date on the calendar soon. And so until then, thank you on behalf of everyone here on at the DCYOP community. Thank you for joining us today, and please stay safe.